I've been a trucker for various companies over the past decade, and 3 years ago, I was working for a warehouse company in Nebraska. On February 2nd, a particularly cold Monday, I was tasked with a long haul. It was the beginning of the week, and there were plenty of shipments to get through, so I was determined to finish it all quickly. I started my drive at around 3 p.m., intending to reach my destination by the same night. I didn't want to end up pulling off the road somewhere to sleep. I was aiming to get the job done in one stretch. I was doing about 5 miles over the speed limit, which is quite fast for a semi-truck, but I was in a hurry. By the time it was past midnight, I was feeling the strain of the long hours behind the wheel. My eyes were getting dry, and keeping them open was becoming more of a chore than usual. I splashed some water on my hand and rubbed it on my face, hoping it would help wake me up. It did, but only a little. The road was deserted. Mine was the only vehicle out there at that hour, so the only light came from my truck's headlights. The dark, empty road ahead was almost hypnotic, lulling me into an even deeper state of exhaustion. As I reached over to take a sip of water, I nearly choked when I saw a figure looming in the distance. My foot instinctively slammed on the brakes, and the truck slowed down to a near halt. As I got closer, I could see the figure more clearly. It was a man standing almost in the middle of the road. He was wearing all black, with some kind of scarf wrapped around his neck. But what caught my attention was his neck. It was unnaturally long, almost grotesque. The sight was jarring, unsettling in a way I couldn't quite describe. His face was a blur. No distinct features could be made out, which only added to the eerie atmosphere. As the truck rolled to a stop, I considered rolling down the window to ask if he needed help, but before I could do anything, he turned abruptly to his left and darted into the woods. The speed and silence with which he moved were unnatural. Without taking another moment to think about it, I pressed on the gas pedal and continued down the road. As strange as the encounter was, I was in too much of a hurry to dwell on it. However, about 20 seconds later, the full impact of what had just happened hit me. My heart started racing, and my mind replayed the bizarre scene over and over. It took about 5 minutes for me to calm down, but just as I was starting to relax, something else happened. As I returned to my cruising speed, I saw something dart across the road in front of me. Initially, I thought it was a large animal, but as I got closer and saw it disappear into the woods, I realized it looked like another person. This time, I didn't even tap the brakes. I kept my foot on the gas, maybe even pressing it a little harder. I was starting to get genuinely freaked out and just wanted to reach my destination as quickly as possible. A few more minutes passed without incident, but I was getting increasingly tired. I noticed that I was swerving into the other lane occasionally, and with about 40 minutes left in the drive, I started to doubt whether I could make it. I began scanning the roadside for a place to pull over and rest. Eventually, I spotted a small gravel clearing on the side of the road, likely a makeshift rest stop. I pulled the semi into it, parked, and leaned back to close my eyes. I must have fallen asleep almost instantly because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to complete darkness. I didn't know what had woken me, but something in my gut told me to turn on the headlights. When the headlights flickered on, they illuminated the area in front of my truck, and there, standing directly in the beam, was the man with the black scarf I had seen earlier on the road. But now I could see his face clearly. He had a disturbingly wide smile stretched across his face, and his eyes were open as wide as humanly possible, staring right at me through the windshield. Panic surged through me. How could he have possibly walked the 10 miles from where I last saw him? I didn't waste another second. I turned the truck on, pulled out of the clearing as quickly as I could, and sped off down the road, not daring to look back. I didn't stop again until I reached my destination. I parked in the lot, locked the doors, and fell into a fitful sleep, only to wake up early the next morning with the unnerving feeling still lingering. The only logical explanation I could think of was that my mind had been playing tricks on me due to exhaustion. But the vividness of the hallucination, or whatever it was, still confuses and terrifies me to this day. If you've made it this far, you're 100% a horror fanatic, and we approve. If you love our campfire-themed horror storytelling experience, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our daily uploads. Before landing an office job in Chicago, I spent 2 years working as a UPS driver. The pay was good, and for the most part, I enjoyed it. But like any job, it had its moments, some of which were far from pleasant. It was 2010, and I had been out of college for about 2 years. On this particular Thursday, I was working the 11 o'clock a.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. shift. It was the dead of winter, and by 5 o'clock p.m., it was already pitch dark outside. I wasn't exactly living in a nice area either. My routes often took me through some of the rougher parts of a small town in South Carolina. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a ghetto, but it wasn't far off. The town was a mix of spaced-out trailer homes and small houses, with entire blocks sometimes completely desolate. Deliveries in this area were always a bit of a challenge because the houses were so spread out that it took longer to get from one to the next, unlike in a suburban or urban community where everything is closer together. The routes were mapped out strategically, but they still required a lot of driving. After hours of deliveries across at least 3 small towns, I found myself heading down one of those spaced-out streets. On one side, there were trailer homes and small houses. On the other, just a dense forest. It was a little after 6 o'clock p.m., and my shift was winding down with only a few deliveries left. One of the packages was marked for a house on this block, and it required a signature, meaning I couldn't just leave it on the porch. I pulled up in front of the house, went to the back of the truck, and pulled out one of the heaviest boxes I'd handled that day. Whatever was inside clanked and rattled with metal pieces, but it wasn't my job to guess what it was. My job was to deliver it to the front door of the trailer home. There was no doorbell, so I knocked. The house was dark, no lights on, and there was no car out front, but I hoped someone was home. I knocked again, a little harder this time, and eventually I saw movement. A curtain shifted, and I heard footsteps approaching the door. There was a long, suspicious pause before the door finally cracked open, revealing an older woman. She was thin and gaunt, her hair unkempt, and she seemed nervous, almost jittery. When I told her she had a package to sign for, she opened the door fully and took the device from me. Her signature was shaky and barely legible. Then she asked if I could help her carry the box into her room. I figured that would be the case, given the size and weight of the box, so I followed her inside. As soon as I stepped into the trailer, I was hit with a stench, a foul, almost sour odor that made my stomach turn. Every house has its own smell, but this was something else entirely. She led me through the small living room and down a narrow hallway. It was a struggle to carry the box in such a confined space, but I managed. She opened the door at the end of the hall and asked me to maneuver the box into the closet at the back of the room. I asked her to turn on the light, but she claimed it didn't work. The room was almost pitch black, the only light coming from the dim lamp in the living room that barely reached down the hallway. I could see just enough to navigate the box into the room. As I got closer to the closet, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was someone standing in the corner of the closet. I was certain it was a person because of the outline and the slight movement I detected. There was no logical explanation for it. Someone was hiding in there waiting. I quickly placed the box down and hurried out of the room, mumbling a hasty, "Have a nice day" as I passed the woman. She started yelling at me, demanding I come back and help her, even going so far as to call me a piece of trash. But I wasn't about to stick around to find out what she and whoever was in that closet had planned. I went back to my truck, finished my remaining deliveries as quickly as possible, and went home that night. The experience shook me enough to start looking for a new job. It wasn't long after that I transitioned to my office job in Chicago, leaving my days as a UPS driver behind. I've been a truck driver since I was 25, and over the years, I've done countless night drives, each with its own set of challenges. I'd had my share of odd experiences, but one in particular has stuck with me. I was doing deliveries for a logistics company that required me to drive across state lines frequently. On this particular day, I was assigned a haul from one side of California to the other, a trailer full of wooden furniture items. The route took me through open desert roads, the kind that seemed to stretch on forever with nothing but barren land on either side. It was going to be a long drive, and I had started later in the day than I would have liked. so I knew I'd be driving through the night. The desert roads at night are something else, straight, empty, and eerily quiet. The lack of traffic allowed me to push the truck a little faster than usual, but that also meant that when I saw flashing rear lights up ahead, I had to hit the brakes hard to bring the truck to a stop. As I pulled up behind the car, I saw that it was an old Chevy Impala, parked on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. Being the good Samaritan that I am, I got out of my truck to see if the driver needed help. I walked over to the car and tapped on the window, but there was no response. Bending down to look inside, I realized the car was empty. I checked all the seats, but there wasn't a soul inside. Confused, I looked out into the dark desert, but I couldn't see anything beyond the faint glow of my truck's headlights. For some reason, I felt compelled to help, so I went back to my truck and grabbed a flashlight from the toolbox under the passenger seat. It was a heavy-duty tactical flashlight, the kind that could light up the entire area. As soon as I turned it on, the beam revealed something I hadn't noticed before, an old, abandoned gas station a little ways off the road. The building was barely visible in the darkness, blending into the desolate landscape. It had no concrete parking lot, just dirt and sand, with two gas pumps standing in front of a small, run-down building that might have once been a convenience store. It made sense that whoever owned the car might have gone into the building, so I decided to check it out. The front door was permanently jammed open, and when I shone the flashlight inside, it illuminated what looked like an old store, long abandoned. Shelves that once held snacks and drinks were now empty and covered in dust. I called out, letting anyone inside know I was there to help, but my voice echoed eerily in the empty space. The echo made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That's when I heard it, a faint sound, like a shoe scraping against the floor, coming from the far side of the room, behind one of the shelves. I called out again, offering assistance, but the only response was a deep, heavy whisper, "Get out." The words were clear, but the intent behind them was chilling. I could also hear heavy breathing coming from one corner of the room. My instincts screamed at me to leave, and I didn't need to be told twice. I hurried back to my truck, but as I walked away, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks, a woman's scream, followed by more muffled sounds. For a few seconds, I was frozen, unsure if what I was hearing was real. Then, the urgency of the situation hit me. I ran to my truck and called 911, explaining the situation as best I could. They asked for my location, but all I could tell them was that I was by an abandoned gas station on a desert road. While I was on the phone, I suddenly noticed the Chevy Impala's lights turning on, and the car sped off down the road. I hadn't even noticed anyone getting into the car. It was that dark, and I had been so distracted by the phone call. Panicking, I ran back into the building, flashlight in hand, to see if anyone was still inside. When I reached the back of the room where I had heard the voice and breathing, I was horrified to find a fresh pool of blood on the floor. I quickly relayed this information to the 911 operator, telling them I believed I had stumbled into a crime scene. They instructed me to wait for the authorities, and after what felt like an eternity, several state troopers arrived on the scene. They took my statement and asked for any information I could provide, a description of the car, the suspect, anything. All I could tell them was that it was a black Chevy Impala from the early 2000s and that I heard a man tell me to get out before hearing the woman scream. There was no body left behind, but the blood on the floor was evidence enough that something terrible had happened. I wasn't able to be of much more help. I didn't have a dash cam at the time to capture the license plate or any other details. But the incident haunted me, and I immediately installed a dash cam in my truck the following week. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, one that I hope never to repeat, but it's something that will always linger in the back of my mind, a haunting memory of the night I stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined.